My daughter is asking me for $25,000 to marry her stepbrother after not speaking to me for 8 years because she chose her cheating father. My 29-year-old daughter contacted me, 52, last month after 8 years of silence. She sent me a message saying she wanted to talk. My daughter and I stopped speaking when she was 21. That year I divorced her 54-year-old father. The marriage ended after I found out my ex had been having an affair with his co-worker for 3 years. My daughter immediately took her father's side. She told me I was overreacting and that I should have worked harder to keep him interested. Those were her exact words. On top of stopping answering my calls, she blocked me on everything. I tried going to her apartment once, but she wouldn't open the door. I know she was there, I could hear her moving inside. She never responded to anything. Over time, I stopped trying. It hurts to lose a daughter, but that was my life at that point, with my whole close family, husband and daughter, turning their backs on me in different ways. After the divorce, I moved to another city and started working for a manufacturing company. The pay was decent. I rented a small apartment and, in general, kept my distance from them. About 4 years ago, I met Paul, 56, at a community event. He owned a chain of hardware stores in 3 states. We started dating and got married 2 years ago. Paul has 2 kids from his first marriage. His son, my stepson, is 32 and works as an architect, and his daughter, my stepdaughter, is 28 and teaches at a high school. They were kind to me from the beginning. My stepson and his wife often invited us over for dinner. My stepdaughter and I started going to yoga classes together on Saturday mornings. Last year Paul sold 2 of his stores and we used part of that money to travel. We went to Italy in the spring and Japan in the fall. I posted photos on Facebook because my stepdaughter asked me to. She wanted to see pictures from our trips. I didn't think much about who else might see them. My daughter's message arrived 3 weeks after I posted photos from our trip to the Swiss Alps. She said she missed me and wanted to meet for coffee. I immediately distrusted it, so I didn't agree and told her that whatever she wanted to talk about, she could tell me there. She talked about her job and that kind of thing, and that she was still close to her father. Then she told me she was engaged. I asked who she was marrying, and she said his name was Michael and they'd been together for 2 years. She showed me pictures of him. He looked familiar but I couldn't place where from. She kept talking about their relationship and their plans. Then she mentioned that Michael's mother had died last year and that his father was my ex. She was engaged to the son of my ex's wife, the woman my ex had the affair with. Her name was Linda. Michael was Linda's son from a previous marriage. He was 16 when my ex and Linda started seeing each other. Now he was 27 and engaged to my daughter. She told me my ex and Linda had been married for 5 years. Michael had lived with them during college, and that's how my daughter and Michael met. She wrote that they fell in love naturally and that it made sense since their parents were together. I replied that it was a very sweet love story with light touches of Alabama, but I wanted to know why she was telling me all this when she clearly didn't care about my life, or her father's life for that matter. Then she told me she wanted me to be part of her life again. She'd been wrong to cut contact and she regretted it deeply. She wanted to rebuild our relationship before it was too late. I asked if she was dying, but it wasn't anything like that, so my next question was what had changed after 8 years. She said she was getting married and it had made her realize family was important, which I believe, because she loved family so much she was willing to marry her stepbrother. I left that last message on read. Then, without me asking, she started talking about her wedding. They were planning a destination wedding in the Bahamas. It sounded expensive. She showed me photos and everything. She talked about the beach ceremony and the hall for the reception. She said they'd already sent a save the date to 50 people, but the wedding was going to cost about $60,000. I still didn't say anything. My ex had offered to pay half, but it was going to be a little difficult to cover the rest. They were already asking guests to pay for things like their flights, but they still had to cover some on-site costs. Linda couldn't contribute much because, well, she wasn't among the living anymore, and she'd left very little to her son. My daughter and her fiancé had been saving, but they only had about $5,000. She knew it was a tough situation, but they wanted to celebrate in style because you only celebrate love once. Still not getting a response from me, she mentioned my vacation photos and said she knew I was doing well financially, that she was happy I'd met Paul because I deserved to be happy. That's when she finally said why she contacted me, which by then wasn't much of a mystery. She asked if I'd be willing to pay the remaining wedding costs, about $25,000, and if I was willing, also cover a honeymoon similar to my trip with my husband. I don't usually use emojis in my messages, I'm a bit too old for that, but when the keyboard popped up so I could respond, that laughing with tears face was right there and it was too tempting not to use. You don't often get asked something that funny. She replied that she really did want to reconnect, but that the wedding was important to her and she thought I'd want to help. It would be a good way to start over and show that I supported her happiness. I asked if I'd still be invited if I refused to pay, though I wasn't planning to attend, and she answered that I didn't have to give her a response right away, but not to take too long because they had deposits to make. I told her I'd think about it. But not to expect an answer anytime soon, because something like that, with that much money involved, requires at least a few years of deep thought. She started saying that back then she was young and stupid, that her father had influenced her. I got a bit more talkative, because there were a lot of things left unsaid between us, like the fact that an adult, which she was when it happened, can't be that easily influenced. Of course, she felt bad and wanted to fix things. I told her she could, but not by making her first step asking me for money, because that didn't look like a genuine attempt to reconnect. I also wasn't going to accept her playing the card that she actually wanted to get close to me now, because she had her first and only chance and she'd already screwed it up. She wouldn't stop texting that I was being selfish and that I had a lot of money now, so it shouldn't matter. Paul wouldn't even notice $25,000. My stepdaughter came by the next day. Paul had told her what happened. She brought wine and pizza and said she couldn't believe someone would do that. She said her brother wanted to come too, but he had to work late. She stayed until midnight. We didn't talk about my daughter the whole time, we watched a movie and she told me about her students. My daughter kept sending me all kinds of messages, but the worst was when she said I owed her something because I divorced her father and ruined her life. Apparently choosing to leave a cheater was wrong. She also said she was my only daughter and that if I didn't help her, it proved I'd never really loved her. My stepson called me a few days later because my stepdaughter had told him what happened. His ex-girlfriend had done something similar to his parents, and it hadn't ended well. I thought about replying to my daughter's messages, but I didn't see the point when her motives were so obvious, even over text. 2 weeks passed, until my daughter sent me a photo of her wedding dress. She'd put down a deposit with money she didn't have, so if I didn't help her she'd have to cancel the order and lose the deposit. I replied, I don't see how that's my problem. Anyway, I'm not looking for advice on what to do, because it's clear I don't want to give her money. This is just my story about an ungrateful, money-grabbing daughter. I didn't get lucky in life when it came to having a daughter who truly loves and respects me. But at least I have 2 stepkids who are more decent people. I wish I could say that about my daughter. Update 1. Some people mentioned in my post that I should take advantage of the fact that my daughter is desperate and try to get more information. If she thought she could get money, she'd probably tell me more about her involvement in my ex's affair, and that would also help me get closure, because if she seemed like a bad person, it was probably worse. And they weren't wrong, because once she started talking, it was pretty revealing. One day I greeted her and asked how she was doing, just so she'd think I was willing to have a conversation. That's how we got onto the topic of the affair and the role she played at the time. When I asked why she chose her cheating father instead of her mother, she sighed and excused it by saying she was young and she sided with her father because he was the one who stayed in her life. Since I was the one who filed for divorce and left, from her perspective I was the one who broke up the family. I reminded her that my ex had an affair, and asked what she'd do if her stepbrother cheated on her. Yes, I said stepbrother to make the point. She said it was different because my ex and I had a daughter. So I asked what would happen if she had a baby and her stepbrother cheated on her. She replied that every couple is different and a baby wouldn't notice. So I asked what if the baby was 21 like she was. That's when she tried to change the subject. Then I asked if she knew about the affair before I found out. Apparently my ex had mentioned Linda a few times. She'd seen Linda once or twice at my ex's office. Her answers were evasive, so I asked point blank, did you know or didn't you know he was cheating on me? Her version is that my ex told her they were just friends, but in the end she figured it out. I asked when she figured it out. About 6 months before I found out. She didn't tell me. She knew her father was cheating on me and said nothing. My daughter, my little viper, knew and didn't tell me, but now she wants my money. I asked why, and she had the audacity to say it wasn't her place to interfere in her parents' marriage. I was furious, but I wanted to know more. I asked why she cut me off after the divorce. Since my ex was miserable after I left, because he didn't want to end the marriage, she thought he needed her more. I told her I was much worse off, because in addition to losing a marriage, I was completely alone, because even my daughter turned her back on me. Then she said something that made me want to strangle her through the internet. Some people get cheated on and stay in the marriage to work on it. You took the easy way out. I asked about the 8 years of silence, why she never reached out and blocked me everywhere. She said it was because she needed space and I was making her choose between her parents, which she didn't want to do because she was dealing with a lot of stress. I told her I never asked her to choose, but to her I was making it hard by being bitter about the divorce. When I didn't reply for a while so my blood pressure could come down, she dug her grave even deeper and wrote that we both made mistakes. I asked what mistakes I'd made, and she said I was too rigid about infidelity, and that if I'd tried harder to save the marriage, none of this would have happened. I replied that I understood, and therefore she should understand that if she'd tried harder to save her relationship with her mother, she wouldn't have financial problems paying for her incest wedding now. I know they aren't blood siblings, but I wanted to mock her wedding somehow. She started crying, saying it shouldn't be like this and I should be less bitter. So I told her I'd rather be bitter than a mooch who can't even pay for her own wedding. Then she said she didn't mean that she was really stressed, because they'd finalized the guest list and booked the photographer, and now the total cost was closer to $70,000 because they added upgrades. Also my ex could contribute much less than in the original plan. I suggested she change the plan, ask for money elsewhere, because I couldn't and wasn't very interested in helping her. She asked what I wanted from her so I'd stop hating her, but I told her nothing, because any chance of that had disappeared a long time ago. Now I just wanted to hear her version of events to know what kind of daughter I had, so that on the day I missed her, I'd remember this and think about how lucky I am. She asked what I meant by that last part, and I replied, not having someone in my life with such a broken moral compass. She typed in all caps that I would regret it after she had her dream wedding and I missed this chance to have a relationship with the only daughter I had. But my response must not have pleased her, because after that she didn't reply, and it's been almost a week. My message was, first of all, I highly doubt that wedding is going to happen, because you're here barking up the wrong tree, the dog that isn't going to drop you any bone. I must be your only or last option, because you're spending way too much energy on me. And secondly, I already have 2 stepkids who aren't asking me for anything in exchange for having me in their lives, and who, by the way, think you're a bitch, and who I'm not trying to marry, because that would be really weird. After that there was deathly silence, because she didn't know what to answer, or she's realized she's not getting anything from me. Either way, I'm happy with this. I think saying these things to my daughter has been therapeutic. Update 2, my stepson said he was bored and wanted to meddle a little. Of course, first he asked me if I'd mind. He told me his plan to contact my daughter's fiancé. At first I didn't think it was a good idea, better to let the dragon sleep in its den, but then my daughter texted again just to tell me what she thought of me as a mother, and I gave my stepson the green light to do whatever he wanted. I didn't really understand what he was hoping to accomplish, but he said he'd handle it and I should sleep easy, because he would definitely get something out of it, maybe stir the pot. But he surprised me in a big way, because he didn't just message him to talk, he also set up a meeting with him. Michael and my stepson had the conversation in person. I think Michael wanted to talk to him too. To begin with, his mother, my ex, and my daughter had lied to him about the whole situation. They told him that I basically abandoned my daughter after the divorce because there had been no infidelity, but that I still missed my ex and was jealous that my ex had found love. They also said I'd been a bad wife, that I'd cheated, abused my daughter, and a few other things. They said I'd married a wealthy man, which might have been the closest thing to the truth in what they told him, and that I refused to help with the wedding because she was marrying the son of the woman who replaced me. Obviously they lied about the dates of when my ex divorced me so they wouldn't make his mother look like a homewrecker. According to my stepson, that seemed to surprise Michael quite a bit. To make things worse, Michael's father had been unfaithful, so he didn't expect his mother to destroy a marriage when another woman had done the same to hers. My stepson made sure to bring him up to speed, because he knows the story very well and has been following my posts almost from the first one. My husband and my stepdaughter also know these posts exist, but they haven't read them as far as I know. So if you want to say hi to Michael, now's a good time. I think he's earned that, at least. My stepson went to the meeting pretty prepared. On his phone he had proof of the affair that he'd gathered when I found out about everything. He asked me for it and said he'd use it if he needed backup to convince Michael. That part was good, but it wasn't really necessary. Michael was already pretty convinced that everyone around him had been lying to him in one way or another. There were even contradictions between them, which had already raised his suspicions. According to my daughter's fiancé, his mother told him she met my ex at a work conference 2 years after my divorce. He said his mother told him she and my ex waited a respectful amount of time before getting serious. Meanwhile, my daughter had mentioned different date ranges, anywhere from more than 2 years to 6 months after my divorce. Michael wanted to know where I fit into all of this, especially the whole money for the wedding issue, so my stepson gave him a crash course on his fiancé's entitlement, that she never apologized, that she defended her cheating father, and that she wanted a huge amount of money simply because she's my daughter. They had this meeting at a restaurant, because a couple coffees wouldn't be enough to tell all of it. Michael left his plate half-finished when he started hearing what kind of woman my daughter really was, and her attitude toward infidelity. Apparently, from what Michael later told my stepson, my daughter had been very good at hiding these things, because she acted like a great girlfriend. He knew about the money she asked me for, but he didn't know it was that much, and he'd also been trying to convince her to cut the wedding costs. He thought she'd only asked me to loan about $10,000, and that I'd refused because I wanted to punish my daughter's father through her. He walked out of the meeting without ordering dessert, although my stepson did stay and order one. Michael had the look of someone who'd seen a ghost, that's how my stepson described it, and at that point my stepson figured his part of the plan was starting to work. Other things that came out in that meeting: my ex's finances hadn't been great lately, and Michael even doubted he'd be able to contribute any amount toward the wedding. Linda also hadn't left much behind before she died. 2 days after the meeting, my daughter contacted me again to tell me what an idiot my stepson was. Apparently Michael wasn't happy about the timeline of his mother's relationship with my ex either, about my daughter's meddling, and certainly not about the lies, even for organizing the wedding. She said I'd sent my stepson to get revenge on her for not telling me about the affair. My reply was, not a bad plan. I like how you think. But actually, my stepson did it because he stands up for me in the place of certain people who are less trustworthy than Judas. As a result, it looks like my daughter may not be getting married after all, and her dress deposit will be lost anyway. If that was Michael's goal, I think he achieved it. I still don't have confirmation, and based on how my daughter was talking, it sounded like she still had hopes of lying to him enough that he'd be standing in front of her on that day and saying I do. I don't know him beyond photos, so I can't imagine what he's thinking, but from the look my stepson described after the meeting, it sounds like Michael was thinking, what am I doing with my life? My stepson told me to trust the process, and even though I didn't ask for any of this and I wasn't looking for revenge on my daughter, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Update 3: Michael cancelled the wedding. My daughter wrote to tell me I'd destroyed her life and that I must be happy. I replied that yes, I was, but not because I ruined her life. It was because if Michael isn't like her, then my ex and Linda's family deserves better than having everyone lie to him. There was no self-reflection, just the excuse that Michael broke up with her because I'd poisoned him against her. Things also aren't great with my ex now because Michael confronted him and told him that he and his mother were a pair of rats, and for that reason her father now doesn't want to talk to her because he thinks it's her fault Michael found out. Apparently my ex didn't know she'd been asking me for money, and if she'd been smarter, she wouldn't have bothered me. Honestly, my ex isn't wrong about that. If she'd kept quiet, maybe she'd have a cheaper wedding now, but a wedding nonetheless. I asked her why she was telling me all this. It's not like I felt bad for her. She wanted me to fix it for her and convince her fiancé, though I corrected her ex, to at least give her a chance and not end the relationship. She was willing to postpone the wedding for now. But she didn't want to break up with him. I asked her how she expected me to fix it. She hadn't even spoken to him. She wanted me to call Michael and tell him my stepson had lied for me, or at least to meet with him and my stepson and have the two of us tell him together that this wasn't a reason to end things. I told her I don't like lying, and that honesty is a pretty important quality if you don't want to end up in the middle of all this in the first place. My ex also reached out about a week later. It was the first time we'd spoken in about 8 years. He called me a jealous bitch for ruining Michael's memory of his mother. He threw out a few other insults, which honestly didn't bother me much, because I earned them for a job well done. Technically it wasn't my job, but I can handle a few insults if the memory of a mistress is told the way it should be. He said that even though she wasn't in this world anymore, she had been more of a woman than I was in every way. I told him that was fine with me, because the last thing I wanted was to compete with Linda over a piece of trash like him. Besides, in the categories he was talking about, Linda and I weren't competing. Those categories were things like sleeping with a married man, lying to her son, and probably cheating on her husband. By the time I finished, he was furious because I'd suggested she cheated, but I replied that I never said she did it to her second husband, though if that was his first thought, I felt sorry for him. Nothing worse than planting a seed of doubt in someone's head. He didn't write much after that, just stuff like your husband is cheating on you, or similar. It reminded me of being kids and someone calling you ugly and you replying, well, you're uglier. Even as kids we knew we'd lost when we had to answer with the same thing. My stepson kept talking to Michael a bit after things calmed down. He said Michael had moved out and was staying with a friend, and that he wasn't answering my daughter's calls because she was being relentless. Michael messaged me recently and apologized on behalf of my daughter and his mother. He ended things with my daughter for good, which I already knew, and he realized she'd been lying about a lot of things. It wasn't just the infidelity that my stepson helped uncover. He found out she had debts she'd never told him about, 3 maxed-out credit cards, and that she expected him to take on those debts once they got married. He said he felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, but I lived with a cheater for a long time, so it's better not to beat yourself up too much. My daughter also lied about her job paying more than it actually did, which explains the cards, because she was living way beyond her means. He also mentioned his mother, who he now remembers in a pretty stained way. He didn't say he'd spit on her grave, but when he thinks about her now, everything is going to be clouded by the infidelity. His relationship with his father is already complicated, so it's hard for him to forgive this about his mother, even though she's dead. He's also spoken to part of his family, like his grandparents, who also didn't know how the relationship started. They used to have a good relationship with my ex until now. My ex had been planning to inherit their small family business, maybe leave his job and do something calmer. It's not some huge company, just something small, but it lets you work at a relaxed pace while still having a good income without too much effort. Now it looks like it'll skip a generation and go to Michael when his grandparents are ready to hand it over. The rest of Linda's family also isn't happy, but I don't know many more details about them. Update 4, my stepson and Michael seem like best friends now, because over the last few months they've been talking regularly. I didn't know until recently, at a family gathering, which let me find out a lot of things, all related to my daughter, things Michael has been hearing and telling my stepson. My daughter still isn't speaking to her father, and he's the one who doesn't want to talk to her. You already know my ex was expecting to inherit Linda's parents' family business, so he still doesn't forgive her for that either. She's also still drowning in debt, and a collections agency has repossessed her car. She'd started seeing someone, but it doesn't seem serious. It looks more like an excuse to make Michael jealous so he'll come back to her. All because she's been showing up in places she knows Michael will be, bringing this guy along, and many of her posts are about how she avoided a marriage, which allowed her to find her ideal man. But Michael doesn't care, because he's getting to know someone, and not to make my daughter jealous. The latest thing with my daughter is that she left the bathroom tap running and called a friend, flooded the whole apartment, and there are thousands in water damage. She wants her landlord to cover the costs, but it was her fault. She was evicted and the landlord is suing her for damages. The landlord kept her security deposit, but there are still bills to pay, and it's 99% certain the landlord will win.